That decision to move across country and move away from my children, for me, it was turmoil. For them, it was stability. And that was not easy. It was killing me. My kids, in my mind, in my spirit, in my heart, are very close to me. They've always been inside of me. You say, you stay here. I will keep you safe. I will take care of you. Even though physically I'm not here, I will go off and get these jobs. This old line says, if we would raise the children that we were given instead of the children that we wanted them to be, there'd be no need for psychiatry. It's that acceptance of who they are. And I've heard people say this all the time, but you live it yourself. You have 3 kids. They're 3 very different people. And you see a little bit of yourself in each one of your kids, too. I gave myself a standing ovation the day my daughter graduated from college. I think I'm clapping as much for her graduating from college as I was about, okay, I got them all 3 through school. So it meant a lot to me to be able to do that for them. I'm actually really grateful in some ways to have gotten this opportunity to be mayor. This is the challenge, responsibility, and privilege of a lifetime all rolled into one. Karen and I have been together since 2003. One of the good things is our relationship felt like it was complete in a lot of ways from the potential of things right from the beginning. We just kind of got slammed together by destiny. I'm somewhat paraphrasing the great line I read years ago, written by the great Irish playwright George Bernard Shaw. The harder I work, the more I live, the more I love, because I want to be used up when I die. That spoke to me. So when I was coaching, we used to tell kids, what you give is what you keep, and what you save is what you lose. Leave nothing out there, no regrets. I'm just trying to live my life that way.
Greater Good Radio, connect, learn, heal, and grow, is brought to you by Brain Gain Hawaii, a boutique executive recruiting, career development, and coaching firm. Learn more at braingainhi.com. Welcome to Greater Good Radio. Today's guest is Rick Blangiardi, the mayor of Honolulu. This is Rick's 4th time back on the show. And the last interview, the last 20 minutes to me, was one of the most connecting 20 minutes I think I've spent on the show. And we wanted to see if we could continue that. So here we are, back again with the mayor of Honolulu, Rick Blangiardi. What you just said about that resume piece is something that I've been thinking about for quite a while now. It's not my own, but it's optimizing life for the eulogy versus the resume. It's different. Yeah. Right? Yeah. I mean, I've been to funerals before where it was all about their resume, and it was weird to me.
Yeah. That's the mistake I made last time, which is why I like to...
It's not a mistake, though, I don't think.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah. But for me, personally, really, seriously, is how I interpret it. The intent was for us to get together and record. I went off the rails, in my opinion, because the time that it took to articulate the detail and the details that I talked to you about from one to the other is really incidental, you know? Yeah. You don't need, 4 minutes on why I got to that decision professionally.
Isn't that an interesting distinction, though? It's an interesting distinction that I'm not sure how many people get to, which is, this is what's important to me. This is what matters. I'm going to focus on it. That's something that some people, I think, go their entire life and don't hit until maybe the end, and maybe not.
Maybe not. I don't know. Well, you look, so my intent in wanting to come back is that I felt like, candidly speaking, I'll liken it to a date, even though you and I are not likely to date each other. I didn't do good on my first date, in my opinion. So you're kind of like hoping to get a second shot and just to be real.
So what do you feel? If you put into like a sentence, that first one, you said, I'm not okay with what?
It was too an elaborate articulation over my professional career. Too much time and gravitas and just spent on things that I feel like if your life counted for something, what are the things that you think are the hallmarks that you would hope maybe people would remember, but what are the things that you want to be sure that other people realize, especially when it comes to my children, how much they matter to me? And for me, as a dad who left their mother because it was a loveless relationship after 17 years of marriage, but the 3 kids nonetheless there, my daughter being all of 4 years old at the time, was one of the things in my life that I wished had never happened. I'm in my 3rd marriage now. Karen and I have been together since 2003, so that makes it 22 years. In January, it'll be 23. The longest relationship I've had with anybody. It's maybe appreciated because in the following way. I wished, and Karen would not have been the person because we both had our own paths to go. But I wish if there was something I could change in my life, it would be that if I were that young man once again, and I was selecting the person I wanted to marry for the rest of my life with the most sincere intentions, I wish I had gotten that right. And I wish that had worked, because that kind of continuity adds for me great meaning. Now my life is somewhat segmented by those three relationships. My first marriage, 3 kids, very profound. My second, which lasted almost 13 years before we were divorced, but with a woman who had no children, very professionally driven, and not the same thing. It was how I came out of a loveless relationship. And then I got into this relationship, which I never anticipated. I actually met Karen even in the moment that I met her, as the old saying goes, at a moment in time when I least expected to meet anybody. But our relationship is tied to the last 22 years. And my kids are cut off from that, in a sense, in that she's not their mother. She didn't raise them. She met them as adults. My oldest is getting ready to turn 48. My youngest son is 45. My daughter will be 40 in August. Except my daughter was still in high school, but still yet nonetheless pretty defined people. And so we've treated them as adults. And so our sharing of my kids with her is sort of about their current situations, because each one of them is living a different sort of life, you know. But it doesn't have that flow as if we had it from the beginning, especially because I'm so busy still doing what I'm doing, that even if I were retired with nothing to do, I would go in up to visit my kids and hanging around all day and just, you know, getting in their way and hope maybe they would give me something to do that I could help them, but maybe I'd feel like I would be borderline distraction. So I don't have that notion, but it's just in the flow of life to have had the mother of my children in my life now. If that was that person, to me, would almost have its own harmony, you know? It's segmented that way, and I don't consider myself to be segmented that way. And I guess the trap I fell into the last time we spoke was I was sort of segmenting my life professionally in all these little chapters, when it's really the bigger chapter, you know? I mean, I divorced their mother. I never divorced them. And I think if you interviewed each of the three of them, they would tell you that. I try to be in their lives, certainly try to do that financially. And that was not easy, to be honest with you. I put them all through expensive schools, including college. My kids didn't have to ever pay. I had to subject myself to some tough jobs in some tough places in order to pay that, but I always felt like I owed it to them. I really didn't like that dynamic. It sort of felt that way for me, and maybe that was driven by a sense of guilt. I don't know. But what it did do, though, for me on a very personal basis, is it just separated me from those days, those moments, just the consistency of having children around you a lot, that, you know, as you live life with somebody in a way like I live life with Karen now, had I been able to live my life in retrospect with my kids really around me versus people I would get to go visit or call on the telephone and try to convey as much as possible how much you miss them and you love them. The relationship with the kids, I would have really liked to have had to have the intimacy that I have, as I have with Karen now, as my wife.
So you feel like you missed it?
Yeah, I did miss it. And I feel like I missed it because, you know, it's not the same thing. When you're conducting your role as a dad, you know, and on spot visits here and there, and maybe and occasionally they'll come and spend the holiday with you. It's too choppy for me, for my liking, you know, given the priority that they've been in my life, throughout my life. I mean, Karen tells me, you know, I can't believe the things that you do as a father, you know, and she's surprised by that. But I mean, still to this day, I try to be there for them as if they were with me, but they haven't been with me. And so I think that I neglected to talk about that. I neglected to talk about just how powerful it was for me to, you know, you go into life and one day you think you're going to get married and maybe you'll have kids, maybe you won't have kids. You never know, but then sure enough, you turn around and you have 3 kids, 2 sons and a daughter. And that's not insignificant. And that certainly is far and away more transcendent than any job or title I've had, any of them, from the standpoint of just the human thing, you know, the human dynamic, and especially to be a dad and that all that comes with that. And I just felt like in our last conversation, I had shifted the balance of the weight of my life, you know, as to what, you know, seemingly was important were all these, admittedly, you know, really good jobs in a lot of places, tough jobs, but meaningful and had success. When you think about it, Evan, just say when you were a young person, you're starting out now, you've got through school and you're in a relationship and you decide to get married and have a family, you take a job to support that, okay? Somewhere along the way, and I think it happens to professional people all the time, and careers are so challenging and demanding and competitive, is that what happened was the family was the primary, the job was the subordinate, if you will, to support that family life, and it got turned upside down. And, where the job became the most important and family becomes secondary, and you lose yourself in that. And I don't know if I ever really lost myself, but as I thought about and reflected upon a conversation, it came across like I did. And if this is a legacy piece, I don't really want it to be that way, because really, aside from my personal pride to compete in situations professionally and succeed in those positions and move to leadership roles throughout, and some of that in the back of my mind always was like, being a good role model as a dad for my kids, even though they weren't with me. That, my dad's not some guy who left us and screwed up. He's gone on, and, not just in my professional work, but other things I've done in my life, that, the marriage didn't work between their mother and me, but I've tried to make the most out of life and the things I've done, continue to this day as mayor. But my kids, in my mind, in my spirit, in my heart, are very close to me. And yet they never really were physically. But their well-being, their sense of who they are and who they've become, and as I look at their lives, they're not the kids at the T-ball park anymore, In fact, I've got 6 grandkids, which is a good way to calibrate that, because, I think I knew long before my first son that I didn't get it right. I tried to make it right. I thought the kids would be a catalyst to it. I thought changing my career, because I was really loved coaching football and getting into television sales, would make it right. But it never did. It didn't. And it was just loveless, for one of a way to say it. And I said that earlier. So, but out of that loveless relationship came 3 kids whom I love very much. As a dad, as a parent, if you will, from the standpoint of your parental responsibility, but that's a thing about I'm the dad of, but there's also the more general parenting thing, because you take a responsibility when you bring a kid into the world, and then you have this dad dynamic when the one-on-ones and stuff like that. I don't want that to be slighted. And I barely talked about that, and it just sort of all hit me. So I'm glad that we're on this now, and if they were to listen to this, I want them to know, there could not have been anything in my heart, in my mind, in the makeup of who I am, and everything I tried to do that ever distanced them from me. They've always been inside of me, even though physically I wasn't with them. And they know that, especially in today's world where, you can get a text or a phone call or an email or whatever in a moment's notice at any time under any circumstance. I think, even though it's a physical distance, I think that they know I'm there that way and have been. But that's that dynamic. My dynamic is I walk around with them inside of me as part of my psyche. And just, want them to know that I don't think I could love 3 people more than the way I love my own children. And I think most people feel that way, but I want to be sure that gets said. And my only regret in life, in some ways, is that wonderment of, did I really make sure that they knew that? Did they feel that? Because I think feeling a parent's love is really important, and approval. And I once read a funny line. In fact, I just used it recently, which is so nice in my mind, where the guy was talking about his kids didn't become the people he wanted them to be. And I said, I remember, I learned this a long time ago, this old kind of a line says, if we would raise the children that we were given instead of the children that we wanted them to be, there'd be no need for psychiatry. It's that acceptance of who they are. And I've heard people say this all the time, but you live it yourself. You have 3 kids. They're 3 very different people. So maybe some similarities because kids are kids. And you sit there in that wonderment and going, wow, And you see a little bit of yourself in each one of your kids too. And in some ways, you really want to see a little bit more of yourself. You kind of really want to feel like, you've really helped them based on how you look at things in my own personal journey, my own personal struggle, and the good things that have come from that. You want to sort of feel like you've passed it on a little bit,
So when you say that, you see a little bit of yourself. Like, we'll go one by one, if it's okay.
Matt, he's actually in a transition right now. I want him to be, mentally tough. I want him to realize that, he's single. He's got 2 kids. He's trying to be the best dad he can be. I feel for that because I lived that, okay? And I think he knows this, but There's only so much you can say to your son in the long distance relationship I've had with him. But, you have to accept the fact that life is not easy. It's not saying he's not a fighter. But, I want to be sure he has the kind of grit that it takes to get through the really tough stuff.
So think about this. You said a few minutes ago, if we could just love them for who they are without who they need to be.
Yeah.
And then the next piece became I see myself in them.
I like to see a little bit more of myself in the sense that, you see them going through a tough time, and sometimes you see that maybe it's getting the best of them. I've had those moments.
Which moment would you mention, or if you could mention, that would be connecting for him to hear versus advice, where he would say, oh, I identify with that, but he's not telling me what to do?
Let's put it this way. It's seeing them make mistakes because you can see it clearer than they can, and trying to prevent them from making that mistake, or to give into something that they should be able to overcome, but you can feel their vulnerability. It's more like that. Believe me, I don't micromanage my kids. They're all independent. But you see them living life, as we all have. You feel like you know more as a parent. You feel like you can understand the situation that may seem like it's kind of overwhelming them. And you want to be able to just, make sure they can get through that. And so my son's gone through both personal and professional transitions now at the age of 40, soon to be 48. I understand. I remember when I was there. I remember what I was doing at the same age and the things I was putting up with and dealing with and how I came out of it. And this goes back to a professional thing. But, I got divorced in Seattle. That's where the kids were. I took them. They grew up here in Hawaii. We moved to Seattle. And that was a catalyst. It just really uncovered, if you will, the loveless relationship.
It's your first wife?
First wife. So I'm in Seattle, and we sell the company. I'm at a crossroads. And do I change careers in Seattle like I changed careers in Honolulu when my son was coming to take care of my family and stay there? Or now, with the years I had in the broadcast business and that foundation and my age and where I was at the time, and given, as I said earlier, the high cost of the expense, my kids were in private school and all that stuff, right? And all that comes with it, not the least of which is, if you divorce a woman with 3 kids, it was a 80-20 split. So I had to work. And so the highest paying job, because I was only in Seattle for several years. I wasn't going to reinvent myself there in any way or anything that I could feel good with. My footing was in the broadcast industry. So I took a big job in New York City at CBS in a senior position at the network. But that meant moving across country. It meant a little bit more than 3 years. Having left Hawaii, where I'd lived for almost 20, suddenly I'm in Manhattan. And I'm kind of really, quite honestly, doing it for the money so I could keep everybody whole. I had child support payments, had alimony at the time, in addition to all their expenses. I wasn't living my life for me.
Would you change it if you could go back?
I don't know. I feel good about the fact that I took the job that I never really saw myself taking, because it gave me the certainty, in the short term at least, of that I wouldn't disrupt their lives, as a result of my financial circumstance, from the standpoint of the schools they were attending, or the roof they had over their head, or the food that they were eating, and all that other stuff that you provide, healthcare and all that stuff, right? You're raising kids. So that decision to move across country and move away from my children. So I bring it back to my son. Right now, he has an 8-year-old boy that he loves. And I get it. It's his only son. Loves a lot. Loves his daughter. But his daughter lives in Boise. And my son lives in Southern California. His mother, 2 different women. His mother took her to Boise, Idaho, to raise her daughter, as opposed to Southern California. I guess I get the optics on that. But that creates a different dynamic. But, my son's trying to make his life work in Los Angeles because his son is there. He doesn't want to leave him. And he's had big opportunities if he was wanting to do that. And so I sit there, and you ask me what I have done it. I think I felt like I did what I had to do. In fact, years ago, Larry Price told me this, and it wasn't the attribution to Coach Price. It was because I read it somewhere else, but it simply says that the purpose of all education is to learn to do those things that we have to do at the time that we have to do it, whether or not we want to do it. I didn't want to leave my kids in Seattle. We sold the company. I was out. We knew that. Although I was surprised by it, nonetheless, It was the first time I wasn't going to be, but all the senior management was that way. It was part of the acquisition. So I left to fend to myself, I'd come back to Hawaii. That would have been the same distance, if you will. And there was really nothing to come back to at that time. So it was, where in America do I go? And it became New York City, also because of what it would represent professionally. Look, I went from not too many years prior running a rat-infested warehouse in Kalihi, the old K&L site, to within a matter of a few short years being a senior executive in CBS New York.
Would you give all of that up now?
No, I know. I'm glad that I did what I did, because you know what? For me, it was turmoil. For them, it was stability. If I had stayed, I'd be running the risk of instability. I knew that taking that move, so I went and did something that I knew I had to do, even though I didn't want to do it.
So would they ever say, like, we're okay with that, Dad, we would have rather had you there versus you going off and doing these things?
I don't know at the time they would have said that. I think
no.
today they look back, I think they understand that. They know what I did for them. They all finished up in really good schools. And like I said, none of my kids took out $1 on a college loan, not one.
But now, right now, at 40, 50
right
years
now.
old, where 40 and 50, they can kind of, they're kind of older adults. What would they say now?
If I had a guess, I think that they would say it was good that I did what I did.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm serious. Yeah. Not that my kids don't love me. I think, honestly, they would say, yeah, okay, Dad became, the financier, if you will, for the lifestyle. I think being there might have been really problematic because their mother got remarried, like, right away. I mean, you would like to think every kid would say, no, I'd rather have my dad. But, when I would go visit them in Seattle, and she was married already, and it was like, the stepdad was like trying to be me. And when I show up, I'm kind of, it just wasn't cool, And I think that my being away was convenient in some ways, that they could accept their stepfather for who he was and what that meant for their mother. And so, yeah, I think I made it easy for everybody by stepping out. I made it easy for her. I wasn't the intrusive ex-husband,
Were they close with the stepdad?
He was a pretty good guy, and I don't know, close, but I never felt like I got usurped. I mean, I always felt like I was that, but it was one of the sacrifices I made. And I was only in New York for a couple of years. I went from New York to San Francisco to run KPIX, and then I was president of a company and based nationally, and I stayed in the Bay Area, but I did this other stuff.
That's the hard thing to kind of reconcile and balance, isn't it?
What I did was I created, this is why I go back to my lovely kids, I created with my career and the success I try to create and the monies that I was afforded and how my life played out with my kids, that my being away was sort of stabilizing in a way for the life that they had when they were growing up, and even when they ultimately all went away to college. But I was sort of there in their lives, helping them do the things they would do. And I didn't require very much for them. And I was okay with it because, as I said a few moments ago, they were so inside of me, and they still are to this day, that candidly, without trying to sound like I'm feeling sorry for myself, that was my sacrifice to do that because I no longer could stay in a loveless marriage. I just couldn't.
So the marriage piece aside, though, that's a separate...
Yeah, but it was killing me as a person.
Yeah.
Okay? It was killing me. And I'm not this, like, trying to be a successful business guy, and I'm dying on a personal front because the whole thing is not only meaningless, it was not good. And so for my own sake, my own salvation, but so to save myself, it seems very selfish, I left. And what that meant in leaving, because of the dynamics, if that had happened in Hawaii, or we had never gone to Seattle, I would have stayed here. I would have figured out something. We would have recalibrated, and that would be a very different dynamic. What made it so unique is the fact that after the kids were born and growing up here, we go to a place that they'd never been a part of. I'm a stranger in a strange land too, and suddenly I don't have the opportunity, and the reason why I left, to deal with anymore, and I don't know what the opportunity is. So the safe thing to do is you put your kids there. You say, you stay here. You stay, I will keep you safe. I will take care of you. Even though physically I'm not here, I will go off and get these jobs. I always was fortunate. I got big jobs that paid me well, and I will take care of you. Even though I'm not here, I'll sacrifice that way. I don't know if I ever really conveyed that even to my kids, that I've really felt like in my journey, in my odyssey of going through my life, a lot of the professional work I was doing was in part in that spirit of you take a job, as I started at the outset, to take care of your family instead of vice versa. I always felt like I had to take care of my family. And so Karen and I had no kids, my current wife. And even though over the 20-something years they've been in my life, it's a different kind of taking care of them now because of the ages that they are. And so it doesn't have the same intensity as when they were in their younger years and their adolescence. Certainly my daughter at the age of 4, you know. I had tremendous guilt over that. I wasn't there for her. So I hope today, and now they see me at this stage of my life, at pushing 79 here in a couple of months, working every day, trying to do a good job as mayor professionally and who I am as they perceive me in my relationship with Karen and a husband and wife, and that they see me in a very healthy way now and something they can feel proud of. Not because it's, I don't know the word glamorous of being an elected official. I guess I always wanted them to see me like, my dad's okay. I think now they see me in the kind of respectable way that I would have liked to have them to see me before, but I don't think if I had stayed there, they would have, per se, you know? So in some ways, I'm closer to them today, at least in the sense of we're all adults now. I think they understand life. I mean, even my oldest son, you know, going through the divorce and stuff, I think there is a compassion or an empathy or an understanding now. And I think they understood that too, even back then. There was a point in time, I've never really talked about this, I'm sure that they saw that their mother was really happy. She was in a loving relationship and very different than the one we experienced. And so that probably gave them some solace, like this is a good thing. So in some ways the stepdad thing worked because they saw their mother much happier than we were when we were together. So that was also another thing I removed from their lives, right? There wasn't that tension if you're in a loveless relationship and all that stuff that was going on. That wasn't present anymore. Whatever I was going through, they never had to see. They just saw the things I was putting up with or the challenges that I faced. They didn't have to deal with that, and I didn't burden them with that either. But as I was doing all that stuff, part of it was I had my sense of responsibility to take care of my 3 kids. It wasn't all about me. And the thing I didn't like about our first conversation was I felt like it was about me. And it really hasn't been that way. I feel like I'm driven, yeah. I'm competitive, yeah. I want to succeed, yeah. I guess by terminology, some kind of alpha male. Yeah, in a way. But my motivation wasn't just about me. It was, yeah, I need to compete. I need to succeed. But the reason why is I want to take care of my family. And I feel the same way about Karen. I live with a woman right now who doesn't require one nickel from me. And we've been together for a long time. Karen was enormously successful professionally. Very independent person in her own right. And that's what the relationship is great because it's about the love between the two of us and love at a different stage of life for both of us. And it's very powerful that way. My kids' love was different. It was a parental love. It was a sense of enormous responsibility that I felt as a result of becoming that father. If I could have had the love I have with Karen in that relationship, my life would have been terrific.
You would take that without the professional success? Well, would you do it?
But then I guess I have to start to imagine what would I be doing for a living.
Okay, you know? Something that doesn't make money. Like, you know,
like coaching college football.
Or whatever. You know, but maybe you might enjoy
now
it.
It does. No, but not when I was coaching.
Yeah.
That's why I left. I left to make more money.
So let's say you could do something like coach high school football, which would pay probably even less.
No, if I had like some job, nondescript job, like my dad was a machinist his whole life. He worked his butt off, you know, and a blue collar job right to the end. I could have done that, except that I grew up in the aspiration and the vision that my parents had as first generation sons and daughters, son and a daughter of immigrant people who came to America for a better life. My parents weren't afforded that because it was too recent, you know? I mean, my dad was, you know, born in 23. At the age of 7, he's shining shoes in the streets during the Great Depression. He's the oldest son in a Sicilian family of 6. He has 1 brother and 5 sisters. And at the age of 18, 7 years later, he's joined the Navy in 1941, 18 years old, right after Pearl Harbor, and leaves early 42 and comes back in 45, marries my mother. I'm born 10 months later. And this guy is destined to work basically in a factory. I mean, He worked at the Boston Navy Yard. Then he worked at Watertown House. He came out here and worked at Pearl Harbor. That's how I came to Hawaii. Not really factories per se, but it's a machine. It's really hard work. But that was his life. And my mother had an 8th grade education, and she was the youngest.
That's what I'm saying. This is the binary.
Okay, but my parents, you know, they wanted us to succeed. That was the expectation.
Mm-hmm.
I was the first in my family to even go to college. I mean, it was always that aspiration. So, you know, I can't imagine myself doing that. Would I have done that? I would do anything, I think, just my own sense of survival. I would have done that. But I, early on, had taken hold of my parents' aspiration that everybody came here, their parents, they themselves, and their personal sacrifice, that I would somehow break that cycle, being the oldest son, and make them proud. So I can't imagine that I would have. And maybe that same aspiration is why in Seattle, I made the decision to go to New York, because that was something I really didn't want to do. But nobody says no to a senior vice president position in New York at the network, especially given my background in television. I hadn't been in the business that long.
I mean, if you look at it kind of in hindsight, you either have to take the pain of leaving the kids behind or take the pain of potentially failing your parents. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so you love your parents as intensely as you can as a child. I mean, it's just part of that dynamic. They're your parents. And you do everything you can. And then you shift gears and you're a grown-up and now you're the parent. And so the same instincts. I had the same instincts as a kid, wanting to make my parents feel good about who they were in the world. I did them proud. And then it just shifted in my responsibility with my kids. But that was all about family on both sides of it. And that's why I say I'm so rooted. I had, at this point, if I think about when I got married in 72, God, 53 years ago, would have been great to have had the love I have with Karen for all these 53 years. I've had kids, is all I'm saying in retrospect. That would have been the way to go, no matter what I had to do professionally, you know? But it wasn't. It became a series of different kinds of challenges on a lot of levels. And I want these years now, and even though we're separated, they're also busy. My daughter has 4 daughters, you know. I don't know how she's doing it. From 9 to almost 2. I've watched her. I know she's incredible. But the point being, my parents have been long gone. They never saw some of the success I had after they left, after they died. And they certainly, you know, would probably be in complete disbelief that I became mayor of the city and county of Honolulu. I'm sure it was. In fact, the night we won the first time, in that moment, the reality hit when they said Blangiardi just won. I actually thought about my parents. I thought, well, I wish they were here. They would have been so enormously proud. So that sense, again, of family, mother and father, kids, wife. I mean, there isn't anything I wouldn't do for Karen now, but she doesn't require very much, just our companionship with each other. Still to this day, I try to help my kids and whatever counsel I can give them. And, you know, they're all independent. And I'm proud of that. But, you know, I want to be there for a love source for them because I still love them as intensely as I did when they were younger. My daughter said I sounded very vulnerable, and she was surprised at that. And my takeaway on that, and if she listens to this someday, was insightful in that I don't know if she saw that side of me, you know, and how she interpreted that vulnerability. Look, I've always felt from a leadership standpoint, in order to lead effectively, you've got to be vulnerable somewhat. It's not the pretense. You want to be real, right? You want to be authentic. And that authenticity is vulnerability. We're all people. So I think the funny thing is so much of my life was driven about family and still is as far as my core belief. And maybe it's even somehow spread into my philosophy from a leadership and having run organizations. They become like extended families, you know? I mean, the city is too big to be an extended family in and of itself, but we've got a really great cabinet team and stuff, and I've always been kind of a coach in the team thing. But that runs on a very personal level with me. I did a lot of what I did. It wasn't about me. It wasn't ego-driven. It was because I had responsibilities that required money to do the best I could by my family in this world. And I gave myself a standing ovation. The day my daughter graduated from college, I would have done it anyway. I stood up, I was clapping. I think I'm clapping as much for her graduating from college as I was about, okay, I got them all 3 through school. So that meant a lot to me to be able to do that for them. I remember how dramatic it was. I remember when I was with them, I left, they were all kids, what that was like. And then all that got cut off and life became very different.
What was it like?
It's hard. I hurt inside a lot during those years. There was a lot of internal pain with that.
Is there a moment that you remember in particular that you could share that's emotionally moving?
There were a lot of those when I just had to swallow because I left that mother that, my kids sort of belonged to her in a sense because they centered around her life, getting remarried. You travel across country. I'm in New York. I go to see my son play a game, and then they're all getting in his car, and they're going somewhere else, and you're going back, and I was there like a visitor, but I'm the dad, stuff like that. I mean, look, like I said it again earlier, and maybe this is proof positive, because if somebody's listening to this, they might think, yeah, but you went and did all these jobs, I changed careers when my then wife found out she was pregnant, and I was doing well as a coach, but we weren't making any money. I was a defensive coordinator and associate head football coach at the University of Hawaii. By the time I was 28 years old, and I was making $15,000 a year. Larry Price was the head coach making $25,000. When Ray Nagel hired Dick Tomey to come and succeed Larry, they only paid him $35,000 a year from UCLA. That was an era when we were all in for the love of the game. And despite my success and even educational success, I was pleased with myself that I actually got a master's degree too, along with what I was doing professionally. I just wasn't making any money. And with a baby coming, and the baby didn't come right away. We'd been married for 5 years. I just felt like, okay, I need to make some money. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And it was C. Heftel who said to me, who owned KGMB at the time, that if you were willing to work hard in this television business, that I knew nothing about TV or TV sales. He said, in 3 years, you can make $50,000 a year. That just happened to be on a multiple 3 times what I was making. It was double what Larry was making as a head coach Bryce. It was the first time, even though I went to college to have a better life and the aspiration for my parents, I actually was having a money conversation because we didn't talk about money when we were coaching. So it was the first time I looked at, okay, I'm now going to have a responsibility. I need to shift gears and do something else in order to pay for that responsibility. But that's even before my son was born. So I was at that same crossroads not many years later. I'm making that decision to leave Seattle after my marriage ended there and go to New York with the same thing. Like I said earlier, I would say it again. You do those things in life, you have to do it the time you have to do it, whether or not you want to do it. I think that's made a big difference, understanding that.
So I know that you came back onto this piece because there was something missing on the first one. In the last 20 minutes of it was super special. And the piece about your son in our very first one are 2 of my most special moments because they were moments of vulnerability, meaning like I'm opening myself up to injury, potential injury emotionally, but I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And that becomes connecting. That made it special. When I heard those ones, that was like you went into the space, you went into that moment. If I watch it ever again and so on, I'm in that moment with you in your pain and struggle, which is what makes it really connecting. I'm trying to guide it into that space.
Okay, but in the spirit of what we said today, the reason why I wanted to talk to you more was I felt like the biggest chapter of all I left out, which was the love of my kids and how that motivated me. That triggered decisions in my life, that responsibility, that love. And so it wasn't like no matter what the challenge is going to be, I'm going to do it because I have to do it, like kind of thing.
Can you take me actually there? I want to be there, like feel it with you.
So, look, as I said a few moments ago, I'm hoping as my kids see me in this stage of my life, living my life the way I'm living it, doing what I'm doing. And I'm actually really grateful in some ways to have gotten this opportunity to be mayor. And I'm really grateful. I mean, I've said all along, this is the challenge, responsibility, and privilege of a lifetime all rolled into one. But that they can see that their father's in the twilight of his career, has worked hard his whole life, continues to work hard, continues to do the best he can, has not shied away from responsibility, maybe not the direct responsibility of my kids, but what it takes, if you will, in the spirit of, altruism, if you will, when you have a job like this, which can be pretty consuming. That I was a okay human being, that they had a good father, who loved them, who was a solid guy, who was just trying to make things better and has tried to do everything he could for them, whether or not I did or whether or not I could. I mean, look, I know you remove yourself as their father, their biological father, from the day to day. That hurts them. I've realized that, driven out of my own sense of survival. And I've always wanted to make up for it. And so I have 3 different relationships with 3 different kids. The dynamics are all different. I just try to establish that. So if, in fact, like you said, this is a kind of a eulogy thing, I don't want to think that even though I wasn't there every night to kiss them and put them in bed in those years, that I wasn't somebody who didn't love them or would do anything for them, who cared about them greatly and did till his final breath. I think they have a sense of that. But for me, that matters, because that's what this whole struggle has been about, is to be the best dad I could, just like I want to be the best husband I can to Karen. You meet somebody who is independent, who was never thinking about getting married either, and there we were, 2 successful people, if you will, meeting up in Hawaii. I came back here for different reasons. This was a return and coming home. Same thing for her, though, return and coming home. But, I was still working. She was retiring. And all of that conjured up for her, and what that would look like, because she was, obviously successful, and she was in the process of building her home in Kahala on the ocean, that kind of thing. And I was a guy who still had a lot of work left to do, but I knew what I knew. So what was the good thing is you meet somebody like that. One of the good things is our relationship felt like it was complete in a lot of ways, from the potential of things right from the beginning. We just kind of got slammed together by destiny.
What would be your first memory where you really knew, I love this woman?
I was intrigued with her for the longest time, because we're about as different as you can get. Karen was born in Beijing and, won a scholarship to come to the United States when she's a teenager, and then went on and had an enormously successful career. In part, initially she started here in Hawaii. She was in the hotel business, but she got brought to New York by a guy named Lou Gerstner, a real business icon, to work at American Express. Worked there for a number of years, almost a dozen.
IBM's guy?
He was at IBM, but he was also at American Express. If you read the Wall Street Journal over the decades he worked, he was one of those guys who,
back in the day.
Big-time CEO, Lou Gerstner. So he sort of discovered Karen. So she had an illustrious career there for 12 or 13 years in New York, and then got hired away to go to Schwab, and then evolved and became president of their retail division, was president of the company. She was like third in command, and did a tremendous job, was involved with that whole from, Wall Street to Main Street thing. She did really well, and so I was intrigued by all of that. She had a big leadership job. When she left Schwab, she was in charge of 8,000 employees, and I think they had 400 stores and a couple of big retail centers, and they had $1.5 trillion in assets under management, and saw some things in some books about her and how she was at the time, I think, the highest ranking woman in financial services. We had some things in common about our own personal aspirations and trying to be what we could be. So I think the love thing, it started off with like a great respect and fascination with her, and then it just sort of happened. As different as we were and are as 2 people, there's a connection there. It's like, okay, I'd like to think I am for her who she needs me to be, and she certainly is for me, And in that regard, it's comforting. And I don't know the first time I felt that, but that became its own form of love and connection. It was not that any notion of dating a lot of people or living that kind of life, but our relationship just became, for both of us, because she was in transition. All she had known was 25 plus years of intense work. I know I went back and I met her boss, Philip Reese, at the time was the president at American Express, and they wanted to meet me because her parents were gone. They were acting as her surrogate dad. They wanted to meet me, size me up to see, because they couldn't. And I just got to know her in that light.
What was that meeting like?
Oh, it was interesting. First of all, we stayed with them. They had made a lot of money. They stayed in their 8,000 square foot loft in Soho.
That's
I
huge.
still remember the first night, because these people were foodies, both Jewish, and his wife, but he's from South Africa, has that accent, and his wife Tracy was from New York with that accent. So the first night they ordered this Chinese takeout. We're going to go somewhere. Has it delivered, this kind of lifestyle they led. And it was like a big bowl of jellyfish and a big bowl of chicken feet. And I'm going, I don't eat this stuff. Right off the bat, I am not going to impress them. It was like that. But when we spent several days there with them, and we really hit off. They were very loving of Karen. He was very supportive of Karen because he saw her Mustang her way through that organization and do really, really well, and had a lot of respect for her because when she left, she was in a very senior role there. But the Schwab opportunity was really great.
What if they said, if you love her, you need to eat jellyfish and chicken feet?
We weren't saying I love you yet, I don't think. We were saying other things. But no, yeah, maybe.
You got to eat it. It's actually pretty good.
I know. They all liked it.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I ate it yesterday.
There you go, yeah. But when you asked me what the meeting was, that was like the first couple of hours. It was like, whoa, I'm getting off to a bad start here. Yeah, anyway, it was good. They turned out to be good friends, and Karen talked to them not too long ago. They're very pleased with the way our relationship has lasted. And I think that's the other thing. We've both comforted in the fact that we both know we're getting older, and there's a strong bond there as we get into this chapter of our lives.
What would be like the most meaningful memory you can remember?
The funny one really is the decision I made to actually ask her to marry me and how I went about it. So one of the things that I learned about my Chinese wife is that she's extraordinarily sentimental, and she loves her father intensely. You know, she was the oldest girl, one daughter, two younger brothers. And in the Chinese culture, when she was born, her father was an English professor. They literally walked out of China to escape Mao. And she grew up in a refugee camp in Hong Kong, in Taiwan originally, but her dad passed. And so she had really fond memories of him. And so when she and I would go to New York, we used to go to Central Park, walk by, and she'd say, and I used to sit there with my dad. It was a bench down along the water, and we spent a lot of hours there. And I knew it was a really meaningful place for her. So I decided to ask her to marry me. And I was going to ask her at that site because it meant so much to her. And I was going to do it to make it even more so because I knew when we would be in New York together, we were going to go back on Thanksgiving. And I thought that would be very poetic. And I was also thinking the Macy's Day Parade, nobody would be in the park, right? But I'll take her to this really romantic site and just to kind of make it fulfilling. So we get to New York on like a Monday, and it's pouring rain. Thanksgiving is always on Thursday, right? And it pours rain Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And I had the ring with me, which she didn't know. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to do? I had this whole thing going. Well, sure enough, Thanksgiving morning, it was like a summer day. It was absolutely beautiful. After 3 cold, rainy days, in New England, New York, that will do that in the Northeast. You'll get this bizarre, and sure enough, on Thanksgiving morning, we go to the park, we're going to take a walk, let's go down. And there in the park, there are lots of people. I just wasn't expecting that. And so we still managed to get down to the bench. Nobody's there, but there were people all around, and there's little kids and stuff. And so I envisioned, doing something I had not done prior, which was to get on my knee and just be as traditional and loving and make it fun as I could be. And so I was sitting there, kind of almost a cold sweat, thinking, how am I going to do this? I ended up doing it. And she said, what are you doing? And I could feel the eyes were on me or whatever. There's people, and then I asked her to marry me. And then her initial reaction was a bit of a gasp as opposed to a yes. It was like, that kind of thing. And it was really funny because people looked. A couple of people, I think, even clapped afterward. It was like that. It became very public when I wanted something very private and sentimental. But it was just her surprise at it. Of course, that began a 10-year engagement, but that's neither here nor there because we didn't exactly rush to get married. In fact, when we got married, most people thought we were already married. They didn't even know. But that, be it as it may, it was really a fun moment because that did represent a real change in our future because we'd been together almost 5 years, and it was a question of, like, at that time, is this relationship going to go there? What are we doing? And we want to keep it like this. We could have kept it like that. We did, in a sense, but we didn't have that commitment prior. So getting married was almost, not anticlimactic, but it was sort of there. But it spoke to commitment. It said, okay, I know where I am in life now. You know where you are. And we belong together. We got married, it'll be 7 years ago, this September 15th.
Wow.
Yeah, my 72nd birthday.
It's on the same day as your birthday?
Yeah.
Was it on purpose?
Yeah.
Easy to remember?
No, I would remember it. She said, what do you want for your birthday this year? I said, what I want is, in the spirit of truth in this relationship, why haven't we got married after 10 years? Is there something we're not saying to each other?
If it's going 10 years, when is it like, okay, this is now it's really happening?
I don't know if you know this, but Karen had historically thrown parties for me on my birthday. It just so happened that year, 7 years ago, it was on a Saturday. And we met at a restaurant through a mutual friend in Neiman Marcus. So we took over Mariposa. We booked the room for the night. I think we had like 20 people. We was much as the fire marshal, whatever we could put in there. And we told everybody, it's my birthday. It's on a Saturday. It's number 72. We want to spend it with all of you. People we invited, just come. Don't bring a card. No lay. Just come for a good time. And everybody bought into that. And so everybody thought they were just coming to my birthday party. So we had them get there, like, I forget what time, around 6 or 5:30 or whatever, and the room was set up, and we had cocktails, and we had a band playing. But we were getting married at our apartment in front of my kids and some of her family. And so we go to the reception. Everybody thinks they're there for a birthday party, and we had Janai was singing, and so she said, oh, Rick and Karen are here, and so they started playing Happy Birthday to You. We start walking in, and everybody's singing Happy Birthday. Like we're an hour late, and everybody's 2 cocktails into it. And all of a sudden, the music stops, and then she starts singing Going to the Chapel. And then it was nice. We threw a surprise wedding for everybody. Like I said, we thought you guys were married. We didn't even know, And so we spared everybody going out and having to buy us a frying pan. It was nice. Everybody had a great time. We're supposed to be out there. It was supposed to be out there at 9:30. I think at 11:15 we were finally getting out of there, but everybody had a really good time, and it was pure and it was innocent. That was a great memory. That ties in with the proposal 10 years earlier in the park. Those are nice moments.
What was your favorite memory from that night?
I think it was the fact that people were kind of blown away that we threw a surprise wedding reception as a surprise birthday party, that they had not experienced that before. Mm-hmm. I mean, who goes to a wedding not knowing they're going to a wedding, But that's the way we did it. And that was kind of fun that we pulled one on everybody. They were like, I can't believe you guys did this, It was really fun and joyous.
Did your kids know?
They went to when we exchanged vows.
Oh, and they knew that this was going to be a reception or what?
Yeah, after they arrived in Hawaii, we told them, and they all thought that was kind of cool.
So what else you got on that?
I mean, my life with Karen, it's just a very profound relationship. She's a very strong person.
I still want to know, like, the first moment you're like, oh, this is the one.
As I said earlier, love at a different stage, right? I think that happens differently. I think when you're young, you naively feel this epiphany, but you don't know. I mean, you're hoping. I'm not saying I don't believe in love at first sight, because everybody's wired differently, but I certainly didn't get it right the first time. I know the second time I didn't get it right in the sense that the timing wasn't right. It was too raw from a really negative marriage, what I thought was love, with the wrong person to feel like I was in love. Not that she was a bad person. She was just professionally driven. We're in the same business, but it's not good. And when it ended, she said, I don't love you anymore. I want my career back. Mm-hmm. And so that's what happened there. I should not have married her, for fairness to her, and her to me. So that emotion that triggered that was not right either. Karen's was much more deliberate. It was a calming effect of looking and saying, I want to align myself with a solid human being at a place in life where we're clearly defined as to who we are as people. We're accepting of that, of each other. We see the goodness in each other. Karen has an extraordinarily generous heart. She's very giving. We see the maturity, that comes upon you differently. That's almost like, I don't want to say it's an assessment, but it just kind of like covers you. You feel it. It's just like, let's just be uncomfortable. This just feels like we should be together. And it's been that way. So different kind of, like, this is the one. There wasn't that aha moment. And I don't think I really had that either one of the first 2 times. The very first time, I was going to come back here and coach and go to grad school. Mm-hmm. And she was from Connecticut, and she just finished her master's degree at Central Connecticut. And she didn't want to go, but she wanted to go with me, that kind of thing. And I wasn't strong enough or mature enough to say no. I should have just said, you know what, let me go. And 6 months from now, you still feel the same way. I didn't. That was stupid. In retrospect, was naive. Should have never come out here with a young bride to go to grad school and start coaching at the same time. I started school and started working full time. and left a woman in an apartment, very expensive $140 a month apartment on Colo Place, who didn't know anybody or anything. We set ourselves up for failure. I should have known better. See, that's what I'm saying.
But you got the kids out of it.
The 3 kids out of it. But my point is, what I didn't know then, I felt like I did know when I met Karen.
If you hadn't had the first 2 relationships, you wouldn't approach, or you would approach this third.
I met Karen when I was 56 years old. Okay?
Right.
22 years ago. That's a different guy at 56. The world taught me a few things. Okay? And that kind of part of the story that I shared earlier. So your sense of awareness, your approach to love and companionship even, based on what I've told you, I mean, you look at another human being differently. You look at the potential of the relationship differently. You know, the reasoning and the logic and the emotion in it, which is great, is you feel really fortunate. You feel like, wow, it's a complete surprise. I had none of that in my first time. And I had all the wrong stuff the second time because I was looking for something that I didn't have for a long time without weighing all the other things. I try to live my life with no regrets. If I had things to do over again, I would have never married my first wife because it was just the wrong time. I was immature. I was really driven then in those years, in my mid-20s. I mean, I put coaching before my marriage. I did. I think a lot of guys do, which is why coaches don't last very long. I did it selfishly, just out of my own desire and instinct to be good at coaching, you know?
Looking back now, if you hadn't done that, you wouldn't have the kids.
I know that. I wouldn't have had the kids. And look, I'm not saying any regrets. I can't erase those 17 years. I can just tell you, knowing now in life, if you think back, if you could, time travel, knowing what I know today, in fact, I've known for a while, I set us up for failure. I'll take the responsibility. I won't even blame her. I'll blame me. I should have been more maybe intellectually honest myself about what I wanted to achieve, and I wasn't really focused on us. I was focused on me. And I went along with the us thing, thinking, okay, that's a good thing to do. But I should have said, wait a minute, we're setting ourselves up for an impossible journey here if I'm going to continue to do this. No regrets, like you said. The kids came out of it. Look, it doesn't do any good to regret. You learn. The question is that all of that stuff, the mistakes, the suffering, the dealing with life, what do you learn from that? And what does that do to the quality of your life you try to live today? And I can tell you it's done a lot. It's made my love with Karen pure. It's made my certainly love of being here in Hawaii at this stage of my life, and my love of this job and the responsibility I have and just how I feel about things. I feel like all roads led to this job. You knew me a long time ago. I can promise you, Evan, I wasn't ever thinking about becoming mayor. Didn't know. Now I'm going into my 79th year, and this is the year my dad died. I've already outlived my mom because she died in an accident. But I've thought a lot about that. And I've thought about the physical condition that he was in. And for a guy, like I said earlier, immigrant family, grew up in a depression, fought in World War II. My father was an old guy when he died and was retired. It's a very different 79. So I have that sense of responsibility now, too.
At 79, and you think back about your father, what would be the one either memory or characteristic or story or something that you want to hold with you?
My dad and my mom were very different people. I'm much more my mother's son, even though I'm the oldest. So my brother, I think, is my father's son. They almost a stoic personality. My dad didn't talk a lot. He had a hard time expressing his emotions. And in his later years, he could never say, I love you, Rick, nor could I say, I love you, Dad. He would say to me on occasion, I love you guys, when we would refer to me and my brother. I think that was safer for him to say. My father was also closed-mouthed about his life. I mean, I learned more about some of my father's accomplishments through his brother, my Uncle Mike, before he passed, after my dad died. And I think that's probably true for a lot of people, given that generation. He just grew up as a tough guy out in the streets, and just trying to survive as a kid and doing whatever he could. And then even as a kid going off to World War II, and then coming back even as a kid when he came back. You think about it, he comes back 20. My parents got married in 45. My father was born in 23. 22 years old. He was probably a lot more worldly than I was at 22, just based on what he survived during World War II.
Just struggle.
The struggle, but it was all hard, right? That's part of the reason why he was old, is he worked his whole life, you know? And so I think my memories of my father is really about that, was a guy, and maybe it compelled me too, who had a phenomenal work ethic, but he was really a good machinist, tool and die maker, which is why they transferred him out here and stuff. But he was like that, you know? So I think my memories of him was a guy who I wasn't smart enough as a kid to use the expression that they were old men while they were still young kind of thing. But he was always like that, my father, to me. And somewhat burdened, if you will. I used to reflect on that because I had that sense of burden too, but in an entirely different way. I think my father understood that life was hard, and he fought against that. He didn't really accept it, but he just tried to make the most of it to the extent that he could, and my father did the best he could. I think that's my memory of my dad.
What would be the most connecting moment you can remember?
Connecting moment was the last time I saw him. I had to pick him up and put him in a car. I carried him into the car. Never forgot that. He couldn't walk very well anymore. I had to get him into the car. I remember picking up my father and putting him in the car.
Where were you guys going?
Out to dinner.
What were you thinking at the time?
I was thinking that my father's probably not going to live much longer. And I could see he had mesothelioma and very debilitating. And he was a strong, tough guy. I was younger. The year he died, in 2002, is the year I came back to Hawaii. I buried my father. That actually triggered my decision about coming back here. It was between the 9/11 impact and my dad's death, because my mom was already gone. And the fact that my kids were grown and I was single really enabled me to make a decision to move back to Hawaii in 2002. But I just remember this tough guy. I could see it and feel it, you know, what ultimately, you know, happens to a lot of us. So, yeah, I remember that. I remember his frailty in the end was very humbling to me, very soulful from the standpoint, like cycle of life. And so that had a lot to do with it. I thought, you know, you got to live life to its fullest, and we don't know how long we have. And my decision to come back to Hawaii was one of alignment. I really had missed this place. Like I told the press when I came back, I moved to the mainland in '89, but I never left Hawaii. And I used to visit in those years, but the chance now to, where do you want to wake up in the morning? We had some great success selling Telemundo. I was the president, put a few bucks in my pocket, and it was a question of like, where do I want to wake up? One of the things that I did do, going back to my kids, is I called all three of them. I called them all and said, I have this opportunity to go back to Hawaii. It's less about the job, it's more about where I want to be, but the job's okay, but I want to go back to Hawaii. And every one of them was over the top, crazy about it, because they wanted to be reconnected to Hawaii. And they knew that if I came here, they would be, because they're all born here and grew up here. For the most part, my daughter was young when she left at 4, but you know, would come back with me. And there were times I'd take my daughter back here when I come visit, you know. And she would say, oh, Dad, why do we ever leave? You know, that kind of thing.
With those trips that you went with your daughter, what's your favorite moment?
There's a lot of them. I mean, you know, your dad, you're raising your daughter, and girls are so different than the boys, you know. I joke about this, and if my sons listen to this someday, they're not going to maybe appreciate it. When my boys were like 11 or 12, you know, you'd ask them things like, you know, father to son, hey, how was that? You know, whether they were at camp or playing. It was good. Yeah, good? Can you give me anything better than good? Okay. You know, by the time my daughter was 12, I was asking her for advice, you know. I mean, I can remember saying to her, how do you know this stuff? How'd you get so smart? You know, it was like that. So I think my moments with her, whether we're walking down the streets in New York or Chicago or back here in Hawaii, and just, you know, taking her places, her sense of the world, her comfort in the world, her appreciation. You know, she went to school in Chicago. She went to DePaul, but she wanted to live in Chicago. That was the driver. It wasn't like, oh, the college was. I remember the first time I walked her down Michigan Ave, she couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old. She goes, oh, I like this place. And sure enough, that's what she did, because she was very strong-minded that way. I actually wanted her to go to Northwestern, but she went to DePaul. Yeah. I said, you're going to go to Chicago. You should go to Northwestern. And she actually was going to go there to graduate school, and then she took a job. But she did well there. She thrived there, actually, in 4 years. But she loved the city. And that's what I liked about her. She had that sense of adventure, you know?
So if we tie two things together, Hawaii and then your kids. So let's take your oldest son. What's your favorite Hawaii memory with your oldest son?
I mean, there's so many, right? First of all, your father for the first time. And the boys had, 3 years difference. So Matt had those first few years. I think, being out in the backyard of our house, we lived in Kahala at the time, playing catch with your kid, and realizing he was a pretty good little athlete at like 3.5. He could run and catch a ball and had good coordination. So I had him playing t-ball at 4. He was supposed to be 5, but he was a good enough athlete. Just that seeing it, thinking to myself, wow, this is going to be fun. This kid's got some talent. And I remember that, just the innocence of his youth, and just that you're going through all that early discovery stuff, with a kid, just and realize, wow, I'm raising a son, and we're here in Hawaii, and the love of the beach and going to tide pools and all of that stuff. I think it was that part, that the newness of being a dad and having a son in such a beautiful place. And he was taking to it like it was, because I was a guy who came here. He was born here. And he took to it as soon as he was like, old enough to realize where he was. It was like that.
How about your younger son?
Ryan's probably the most like me. Matt was different than me, but I was fascinated by it. But Ryan, right from early on, was like, oh, I can see a lot of myself in this kid and the way he would act. And I remember that, and it's stayed that way. So when Ryan came back here after college, he just left a couple of years ago. He's been here for 20 years and did some really good work here and stuff, and finally is in love with his old college roommate. They had all these years stayed in touch. I didn't even know, and then he's back there now. He lives in Atlanta with her, and they're doing really well. But Ryan was the fact that Ryan had great depth, a lot of emotion, a lot of feeling, sensitive. I saw Ryan fall out of a tree once. He didn't even cry. I mean, if you looked at my son, if you looked at Ryan the wrong way, he would cry. I mean, he was like that. There were things that Ryan was challenged with that reminded me of myself and stuff. So that was that with Ryan. I realized, wow, this kid's going to be a lot like me. And I was hoping it was a good thing. He had a big heart. He was very sensitive, really nice, good. My daughter was my daughter, I mean, she's such a strong, independent person and smart. And again, big heart. She's got a lot of friends. She did all the way through school. She just did well, played sports, played on a state championship lacrosse team her junior year in high school, which was great. Played soccer, did all that stuff, and always made you proud. She just did well in school. And now today, I'm so proud of her, mother of 4, And this year, she surprised me. She came out to our inauguration. I knew she was coming to Hawaii. They're scheduled to come to Hawaii like 2 weeks later. They made a plan. They're going to take the 4 kids, and we got sworn in the second. And Karen and I walked in, and they do a bit of a ceremony for the admission memorial, and the place is packed. We're kind of like the last to walk in, and there's my daughter in the front row. I was like blown away, and I mean, I think that made me feel really good because it spoke to the connection between the two of us. As she said to me the next day, I wanted to live that moment with you like that. That's good stuff. That's the stuff that made all the things I said to you earlier today worthwhile. You try to do the things you can and then get to a moment like I was having. And she said, I wanted to be there. I wanted to experience that with you. Getting sworn in for my second term as mayor and making a speech with the responsibility I have. And she made the effort. Powerful. Makes me feel like everything we did along the way, that's why there are no regrets, was worth it.
So that was with your daughter as an adult. What about your boys, either Ryan or Matt?
Matt was doing really well professionally. He stayed with Wells Fargo for 19 years. He's doing this entrepreneurial thing right now. It's a bit of a challenge. Him and some other guys left, and we'll see how he comes out of it. But, I think when he got his MBA at USC, from the standpoint of like when you're a parent, you educate your kids, but he kind of did that on his own. He'd been out for a couple of years working, and he paid for that himself. I didn't pay for graduate school, but decided he was going to do that. And he did it. USC, they just don't hand out those degrees, and he did really well, and just got stepping up. And then I thought, okay, this kid's going to, he understands. And, Ryan, his decision to come and live with me and come back to me, because Ryan, I should say this, he left his mother in the 7th grade to come live with me, and it was that closeness that we talked about. And so we were just connected that way. And so life was challenging for me in those years. I ended up putting him in a boarding school for 3 years for high school because I had a job where I was president of a company. I was flying around the country. Turned out, I remember it was up in Vermont. I left him up there and I drove back to Boston to go to the airport to Logan. Tears were running down my face. And what did I do? I just took this kid and just stuck him in a boarding school in Vermont, way up St. Johnsbury. Turns out he'll tell you today was the best 3 years of his life. It was a really good thing, and it helped shape him. And he then went on. He went to college and graduated from Southern Illinois, and he's came back to Hawaii. He wanted to be here with me, and like he was when he was in the 7th grade, and spent all these years. And he worked at Chaminade for 5.5 years. Was the assistant AD up there, and then he worked at for 4 years with Norm Chow, and then Rolovich as assistant director of football operations. Went back to Chaminade. Then he became the AD at St. Louis. And the thing I was proud about Ryan is when he was young, he got diagnosed as having some pretty strong learning disabilities. And that was a lot for him to overcome. And I remember when they first did the diagnostics on him, they told me that he would be impaired, motor-wise and stuff, neurologically speaking. He wouldn't be able to do this, he wouldn't be able to do that. He defied all of that. I remember they told me probably wouldn't be able to ride a bike or skateboard, his balance and stuff. He did all that and played high school football. And they told me he'd probably never go to college, and he did. And I remember that. And I remember the day he graduated from St. Johnsbury, sitting in the audience. This is a great memory. And this is a private school, was not inexpensive, way up in St. Johnsbury, Vermont. And they're giving out awards. And because Ryan had always been challenged in school, and so then I'm reading this one award, and I forget what it was, the title of it. I should remember it because it's really an unbelievable title. And then they said his name. I was like, they were giving out that many. They didn't give out that many awards, but the ones I never thought my kid would be in that running. First of all, he wasn't from there. And I got this big award at his graduation. And I was real proud of him because now he'd take that challenge of living far away on his own and not easy, climate-wise place to adjust to. But he did really well there, and it gave him a foundation. And I'm so hopeful and happy for him right now. And I shouldn't say this, but he would say it anyway. I think he needed to get out from under my shadow for him, and he needed, in this next chapter of his life, he needed that. I think, in the one hand, you're trying to be a good role model, and then you get maybe a little bit larger than life for a kid, because I think all the time Ryan would, we say his name, and they go, "Oh, yo, you Rick's son?" That kind of thing. So now he's someplace where he's not Rick's son. I think that's a good thing for him. I think he realizes that.
Pretty soon you're going to go, "Oh, you're Ryan's dad."
People say that, you're Ryan's dad, right? I've had that, yeah. He had a good couple of years up there. And then he helped me. He left that when they closed the school during COVID, and I was stuck with trying to figure out how am I going to campaign. And Ryan came, and we didn't even have much of a team to put together. And Ryan helped me throughout the whole primary. We were doing 5 Zoom calls a day, 6 days a week, helped me with the computer and all that stuff. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff.
So who else in your life has been special to you?
I haven't seen in a while, but I think about him all the time, is Coach Larry Price was very special. Larry's decisions about me, put me in the starting lineup when I'm a freshman, after coming here as a walk-on and earning my way in the field and starting. I came here in the first week of August, and I had a full scholarship to a number of schools. I was going to go to BC, but they said, "Yeah, we play football. And, yeah, we give scholarships. So you have to come here and earn one." That kind of thing I did. And his decision to do that with me and how that impacted me and my time here for a couple of years playing, and then his inviting me to come back and coach with him. And then when he became the head coach, his anointing me, if you will, to be his successor and coaching the defense and becoming associate head coach and that stuff. And the counsel that he gave me in those years, even when I was making the decision, that was another crossroads, I was at for my family. I could have stayed in coaching. I had coaching jobs in the mainland, but I decided to reinvent myself and stay here. He helped me with that decision about why it was a good place for me. And
What do you say?
First of all, going back to that quote that I said that was in the context when he told me. And that was meant I was going to give up coaching. I didn't really want to give up coaching, but I knew I had to do it. He said, Rick, not a lot of Howie guys in my life. He said, pretty much in those years. And he didn't really like Howie guys very much. He said, but you belong here. You need to stay here. You can make a difference here. It was very meaningful for me, having that come from Coach Price. It gave me my sense of place, because I had been away for a few years. I went back and finished my undergraduate. I was coaching at UConn, and we came back, and I was doing well coaching here. And how that would cross over into something else, I don't know. But, like I said, I took the job for financial reasons at KGMB in sales. The reason why I even knew about KGMB was because Coach Price only did TV interviews, ones when he wanted to, and I became his sort of surrogate. And that's how I got to know Joe Moore really well, because I used to do the interviews when Joe was doing sports on KGMB, and we'd do the road games, and I would find out a little bit about TV, and the sales manager used to travel with him because they used to televise our games, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I did it. And I just, it was about, I got a kid coming, I got to make money. I think Larry made me feel not his acceptance of me, his acknowledgement of me, and the way he trusted me for a player and a coach. And then there were so many things that happened in those years, and things that he would ask me to do, and speaking engagements and different things, and just, and the adversity we were facing, because the football program was in a tough place in those years.
What was something special about Larry Price that other people maybe wouldn't know?
Well, first of all, I know he's a hell of a football coach, and he didn't have that opportunity as a head coach to have the resources anybody would have today. And we had 3 seasons with him being head coach, and a really good mentor, not just to me, to a lot of guys. He influenced a lot of guys. There were guys that we used to pull out of wine-eyed to this day who go down there and tell you they would take a bullet for the guy. I mean, and they're still here, and I see them every now and then, and they were just good. And he was smart. The thing about Larry is, he got a PhD. I think he's got like 2 doctors. One was from USC or whatever. He was a really well-educated guy, and very worldly, spent time in the Army. He's a guy who grew up in Ka'ava, but could play football, tried to try out with the Rams and George Allen. He was also a stalwart in the Army. He played football in the Army. He was a black belt in a couple of different martial arts. And believe me, I worked out with him at a couple of dojos when I was younger. He was a force of nature. He could throw you through a wall. At the same time, when he was coaching the way it was back when I was playing, you just got paid a small stipend to coach, and he was like head of security for Sheridan. Eventually, he got a full-time job. He was a Renaissance guy. That's what I'm saying. I mean, no matter what he did, he could do. There wasn't anything academic he couldn't do. He was a good football player. He was also a martial artist. He was a boxing champ. He held some kind of boxing title, like he was like world champ in Europe or something. He boxed. He could play a ukulele. He had a gifted ear when it came to music. He knew a lot about a lot of things because he read. I mean, you meet the guy when he was younger. He was this big hulking guy. It was so easy to misread him.
Didn't he have some kind of game at Roosevelt that he scored like 100 points? So some kind of legendary game? What was that?
He played at Roosevelt. He played football. He was in the line. He and the late, great Buzzy Hong, because those 2 guys were brothers. No, I don't know about that. I just know Roosevelt, his success story was he started out as a water boy when he went there, because he was small and whatever like that. And by the time he graduated, it was like body doubled in size, kind of thinking he was a player. Then he went away. He went in the Army, came back to Hawaii, got his degree, but played football here.
Well, he must have been pretty old.
He's an older guy, yeah, but he did pretty well. Things went differently with college football in the 60s, although that was a bit of an anomaly than what the world of football is about today. I mean, especially before there's NIL or whatever. We all played before for the love of the game or whatever. But no, as I'm saying, he was just unorthodox in some ways, but just accomplished. He was accomplished in everything that he did. And it was a great role model for me. And he was a guy that helped you understand there are no limits other than the ones you impose on yourself. And, better has no limits. Get better. Be the best at getting better. He challenged the hell out of me.
What was the one time you remember, like kind of a pivotal challenge he gave to you?
I mean, all obviously centered in football. I mean, when I was coaching, we didn't have very many coaches. I think at one time I was the strength coach, the recruiting coordinator, and the academic coach. I was like living in weight rooms and living in a club gym, registering kids and trying to conduct study halls and same time recruiting, He didn't like to go to the mainland, so I became that guy. And so I could always talk a little bit. So with the assistant coaches, he was good at recruiting local kids here, but he didn't want to go up to Fresno to talk to some Hollywood kid in his house and convince him that he didn't want to do that. I think we got him to do it a couple of times, but he was like, no, you do that. And so recruiting from the mainland was a big deal for us in those years. And we had a benefit before Hawaii was in the WAC and it was the old NCAA. Hawaii had a geographic exemption in that we could take kids from 4-year schools and not have to have them redshirt. So that was even before they had the 30 scholarship rule too, a year. So the big schools on the West Coast would recruit everybody, because they had the financial means to do so. And their attitude was, I'd rather have the guy sitting on my bench than playing against me just in case. So a lot of these kids would go there and they all thought they were going to be, All-Americans, and they got hurt, or maybe they just weren't as good as they thought they were going to be, but they were pretty good. But there was somebody better, which is always the way it is, right? Get disillusioned. And this is without NAIL or any of that stuff, because we didn't have that, but they could transfer to Hawaii and not have to redshirt. That was really appealing, plus it was Hawaii. So in those years, we had a bunch of guys like that. We even took on some guys who got in trouble in their schools and kind of bounced, but we took them. Bring us your, we weren't looking for a bunch of altar boys. Even Golden Richards was a good example. Golden Richards came here and had a stellar career and went out with the Cowboys. He played his senior year. He only played 6 games because he got hurt against Grambling, but he got thrown on at BYU. He screwed up over there. He was like the fastest white guy in America, and he came here and did really, really well and blew out, and he ended up going the second round with Dallas, but played for them for a lot of years. And Lavelle Edwards liked Larry and called and said, look, this guy just screwed up. He's a hell of a kid. And so we could take guys like that, and we were opportunistic that way. And when we did stuff like that, and that's why we were back at the old stadium. And even when we moved into the new stadium, we didn't have any 50,000 games. We had a lot of games with high 30s, low 40s. We were trying to evolve the program. And then by Dick Tomey comes in 77, and boom, they start selling out Aloha Stadium. And I'm doing those games with Jim Leahy on the radio, and we're packed, 50,000 people, and people got headsets on, and it's all cool. Very good years.
It's the heyday.
But Coach Price gave me the foundation for all of that. If there's anybody whose decisions about me ended up impacting me because of the opportunity it presented, I think single-handedly, I know for a fact, not think, he was that guy. Because if he had not made those decisions about me and trusted me with being the starting middle linebacker on the football team, know what that meant to be the signal caller, or invited me back to coach after I left, which I didn't really want to leave, but he knew the circumstances. But after a couple of years later, didn't have to do that. I was all the way back in the East Coast. And then when I got back here, I coached linebackers with him right off the bat, varsity linebackers, and the camaraderie we built. And then when he became the head coach, his decision to put me in his place, those kinds of things were tremendous growth achievements for me and recognitions, but they also gave me a foundation, And then his advice to me about staying here, this is where I belong, really made me feel accepted. And that was after a lot of years of having been a player and then coaching with him and, and feeling like I earned the right to be accepted by a guy like, I tell you, he held the bar really high. It was kind of hard to get in his good grace. If you got that seal of approval from Coach Price, it meant a lot. It meant a lot. Yeah.
So in the time that we have left, tell me anything we miss.
I want to thank you for this opportunity, because I feel like today I talked about the love in my heart for my kids, my sense of connection to them, my sense of responsibility, and, beyond emotional ways in any way I could, and what a driver that was for me and how it shaped my behaviors and decision-making. And I'm hoping I'm going to do okay as a mayor.
Have you ever been to a conversation in the last, however many years that you've been mayor for this amount of time, and we talk not 1 second about the mayor stuff?
Yeah.
Have you been to anyone?
No.
Yeah.
I wanted to make it personal, and I'm glad we had this opportunity. And so much of my day is this job.
Yeah.
I learned the great saying from Mike Bloomberg about the days are long, but the years are short. That's what you're up against every day. And a guy wrote to me today and said, any chance we have coffee later today? It said 5:30 this morning. I go, you got to be kidding me. I said, no, my day is already booked for the whole day, and I wasn't about to cancel anything, but I'll find a way to see it. But it's just sort of like that. I'm programmed. I've told Lisa, who schedules me and is my assistant, and everybody else that I want to get as much out of me and my fulfillment of this job as I can. I want my days to be long and hard and schedule hard. And they don't think I know this, but I can see that they're messing with my schedule. They're lightening it up a little bit. And they actually had an intervention with me. I shouldn't even talk about this publicly. They thought I was working too hard. And they thought that I should change the pace because they needed me around for the next 3.5 years. Well, after a few expletives back to them, I told them that I'll be around, But it's been like that. So we just push every day. I feel like, first of all, you got to be present to lead, but I also want to set the tone that we're about getting stuff done. This thing that came from this morning, I mean, we did a condemnation of this place over in Waikiki. Building was built in 49. It's been standing empty for 20 years and full of graffiti and a lot of bad things going on inside it. We condemned it. Today, I went to the ground, we're knocking it down. We're there. And we're doing more of that because by doing that, and we already own remnant city properties. We have 11 city. We put out 7 so far. We've gotten overwhelmed with the response. We're going to use city lands for developers where we take the cost of land out, we'll give them a long-term lease. So despite the cost of construction materials and laborers, they can actually build affordable housing because they're not dealing with the land. And we're going to do that. That's one of the things we're doing. But much like that, every day's game day. I started off today with a 7 a.m. radio show, and we just go. And I try not to do more than 4 nights a week. If I can keep it to 3, I will. And I always invite Karen, but she seldom comes. But, but honestly, it's not about ego of me. But you could be something, honestly, with the requests and the expectations of what people have. And then there's other things that happen here and there. But you could be out every night.
Oh, yeah, easy.
Easy, And
So what would be your advice to your 50-year-old self?
I remember the day I turned 50. I was actually on the University of Oregon on the sidelines. They played Colorado State. I was there. Mike Bellotti was the head coach. He asked me, he said, "You want to spend your 50th birthday?" He put my name up on the thing. And my 50-year-old self, I would say, okay, everything you've done up till now is going to matter because the next chapter is going to be much better than this one. Get ready for it. Because I think that was the foundation of where I was. And I think the last 23, 25, 28 years since then has been full of a lot of good stuff. I hit my stride. I hit my stride in my 50s in the business, for all the trauma about turning 50, and did some really, really good work. And then, and I came back here in my 60s. I was 63 years old when we started Hawaii News Now, against the odds after the 2008 recession, and jumping on the digital era and all that represented in broadcast and how different it was and what we were able to create in that, really providing Hawaii with a 21st century multimedia company. It's in my 60s. So it's been good.
You're like Colonel Sanders.
Yeah, well, it's okay. We can close with this. I'm somewhat paraphrasing it. There's a great line I read years ago. There's an excerpt from a play written by the great Irish playwright George Bernard Shaw. The title of the play was Man and Superman. He wrote it in 1903. And in this paragraph, there's a line in there that says, talks about servant leadership and serving the community. And he's talking about, because the harder I work, the more I live, the more I love, because I want to be used up when I die. I always liked that. That spoke to me. So when I was coaching, we used to tell kids, what you give is what you keep. And what you save is what you lose. Leave nothing out there, no regrets. I'm just trying to live my life that way.
Okay. Thanks for coming on. This is your 4th time on with me. Did you know that? I appreciate you spending your time. You're in the busy season of your life. I mean, this is busy.
Yeah.
And you spent this amount of time with me, and I appreciate it.
Thanks. I feel really good. Thank you. I feel if my kids were to listen to that, if I could have heard that from my dad, something like that, my dad could never express that. My mother was really expressive, and I would hope that they would know that kind of deep love I had for them.
I hope so.
Yeah.
If you resonate with Greater Good Radio, please join our community at www.greatergoodradio.com, where you can get access to exclusive content and offerings. Hope to see you soon.